Rio de Janeiro, Brasil, February 17, 1993. The Maracanã Stadium pulsated with an energy that seemed almost visible in the humid night air. Nearly 200,000 people packed the massive venue, the largest crowd ever assembled for a solo artist performance in South American history. The occasion was Michael Jackson's Dangerous World Tour, which had already broken attendance records across the globe. But tonight's performance carried special significance, as it was being broadcast live throughout Latin America, with an estimated television audience of over 100 million viewers. The Brazilian crowd had been building in enthusiasm since early afternoon, when the first fans began streaming into the stadium. By the time the sun set over Rio, the massive concrete structure had transformed into a living organism of collective anticipation, a sea of humanity united by devotion to the artist who had redefined popular entertainment for the global age. Backstage, in the private suite converted into Michael's personal preparation area, the atmosphere was one of focused calm. The particular energy that surrounds great performers in the moments before they transform from private individuals into public icons. Michael sat perfectly still as his longtime makeup artist applied the final touches to his stage appearance. At 34, he existed at a complex intersection of his career, the unparalleled success of his earlier work now balanced against the evolving narrative of his artistic and personal journey. The Dangerous Tour represented both continuation and reinvention, maintaining the spectacular production values that had become his trademark while pushing into new territories of expression and statement. His team moved around him with practiced efficiency, costume designers making final adjustments to his gold-detailed military-style jacket, sound engineers confirming in-ear monitor settings, security personnel establishing protocols for the complex stage entrances and exits. These preparations had become ritualized over years of touring, each person understanding their role in supporting the transformation about to take place. From Michael Jackson, the person, to Michael Jackson, the performer. What no one in that focused bubble of pre-show preparation knew was that tonight's carefully orchestrated performance was about to encounter an unexpected variable. 3 miles away, at the luxurious Copacabana Palace Hotel, another musical icon was making an unplanned decision. Prince, who happened to be in Rio de Janeiro working on a film soundtrack, had spent the morning watching the local news coverage of Michael's impending concert. The media frenzy, the fan hysteria, the breathless commentary about the king of pop and his unprecedented global impact. All of it had stirred something complex in Prince's mind. The two artists had long been positioned as rivals by the music industry and media, their contrasting approaches to artistry, performance, and public identity providing irresistible narrative fodder. The supposed rivalry, though largely manufactured, had nonetheless created a strange connection between them, each aware of the other's movements, innovations, and successes with the particular attention that only true artistic peers can maintain. Prince had not planned to attend the concert. His relationship with large-scale stadium performances was ambivalent at best. He preferred intimate venues where the exchange between artist and audience could exist without the mediation of massive screens and elaborate production. But something about the energy of Rio, the historic nature of the event, and perhaps a touch of the spontaneous unpredictability that had always characterized his career decisions led him to call for his car. To the Maracanã, he told his driver, a decision made so suddenly that even his personal assistant was caught by surprise. Back at the stadium, the anticipation had built to almost unbearable intensity. The opening acts, popular Brazilian performers included to honor the host country, had concluded, and the massive stage now stood dramatically empty, lit only by the ambient glow of strategic lighting that hinted at the spectacle to come. When the house lights finally dimmed completely, the roar that erupted from the crowd was physical, a wall of sound that seemed to compress the very air in the stadium. What followed was Michael Jackson at the absolute height of his powers. Emerging from beneath the stage in a cloud of theatrical smoke, freezing in a pose of perfect stillness that somehow contained all the kinetic energy about to be released. The choreographed precision, the vocal mastery, the seamless integration of music, dance, and visual spectacle, all of it calibrated to create an experience that transcended mere entertainment to become something approaching collective transcendence. For 90 minutes, Michael commanded the massive stage and the attention of 200,000 people with a performance that moved effortlessly between his numerous hits while incorporating the social messages and artistic evolution represented in his more recent work. The Brazilian audience responded with an intensity that surpassed even his team's highest expectations, singing every lyric, regardless of language barriers, mirroring his iconic movements, and creating waves of reaction that visibly moved through the massive stadium like weather patterns across an ocean. It was during a brief costume change before the final segment of the show that the unexpected variable entered the carefully choreographed evening. Prince, who had arrived at the stadium during the early portion of the performance, had been watching from a privileged position in the production area, his status as a fellow musical icon ensuring access that would have been impossible for anyone else. What exactly prompted his next decision remained a subject of speculation even among those present. Some would later suggest it was spontaneous artistic inspiration. Others would see it as a calculated challenge. Still others would describe it as a gesture of both respect and provocation, the complex communication possible only between true artistic peers. Whatever the motivation, as Michael prepared for his return to the stage for the show's final segment, a production assistant rushed into his private area, her expression registering both excitement and alarm. "Michael," she said, slightly breathless from having rushed through the backstage labyrinth, "Prince is here." The statement was delivered with the particular emphasis of someone conveying not just information but implications, the weight of meaning beyond the simple words themselves. Michael paused in his preparation, his expression unreadable as he processed this unexpected development. "Here in Rio?" he asked, his voice carrying its characteristic soft quality. "No," the assistant clarified, "here at Maracanã, backstage. He's asking if he can join you for the finale." The request was unprecedented. These were two artists who had never performed together publicly, whose artistic approaches and performance philosophies represented different, some would say opposing, visions of what music could and should accomplish. For Michael, whose performances were meticulously planned to the smallest detail, the suggestion of an unplanned collaboration represented a potential disruption to the precisely calibrated experience he had designed for his audience. For several long seconds, he was silent, his team around him frozen in anticipation of his response. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, revealing neither enthusiasm nor rejection. "What does he want to play?" The assistant shook her head. He didn't specify, just asked if he could join for the final number. Another pause, this one filled with the rapid calculations of a master performer considering all the variables, artistic, logistical, symbolic, of such an unexpected development. Then, with the decisive clarity that had always balanced his gentle personal demeanor, Michael nodded once. "Tell him yes. Final song. Jam." The choice was significant, Jam being not only the planned finale of the concert, but also a track whose lyrical content spoke directly to artistic collaboration, to the breaking down of barriers, to the unexpected harmonies that can emerge from apparent differences. The meaning would not be lost on Prince, whose own career had been defined by musical boundary crossing and genre fusion. As word of this unprecedented development spread through the backstage area, a subtle but palpable shift in energy occurred. Technicians exchanged glances of amazement. Security personnel adjusted their protocols to accommodate this unplanned addition to the carefully orchestrated performance. Musicians in Michael's band, who would need to adapt to whatever Prince might bring to the collaboration, quickly conferred about potential adjustments to the arrangement. Meanwhile, the audience, all 200,000 of them, plus the millions watching via broadcast, remained completely unaware of the historic moment being hastily arranged behind the scenes. For them, the concert continued in its spectacular progression, Michael returning to the stage after his costume change to deliver the penultimate songs of his set with the same flawless precision and emotional commitment that had characterized the entire performance. But among those with access to backstage information, security personnel communicating through earpieces, production staff monitoring the performance from the technical areas, media representatives with privileged positioning, a current of anticipation had begun to spread. Something unprecedented was about to happen. As Black or White concluded to thunderous applause and the opening beats of Jam began to pulse through the massive sound system, Michael moved to center stage. His performance of the song proceeded as planned through the first verse and chorus, the choreography and vocal delivery flawlessly executed as the audience responded with the particular intensity reserved for a concert's final moments, when both performer and spectators recognize they are reaching the conclusion of their shared experience. It was during the instrumental break that typically preceded the second verse that the unexpected moment finally materialized. From stage right, illuminated by a spotlight that seemed to appear with perfect synchronicity despite the unplanned nature of the moment, Prince emerged. The reaction from the crowd was immediate and overwhelming, a surge of sound that seemed to physically shake the massive stadium. The recognition rippled through the audience in waves as the two icons of modern music occupied the same stage for the first time in history. Prince wore what appeared to be his standard street clothes rather than a performance costume: black pants and a loose white shirt unbuttoned halfway, creating a visual contrast with Michael's elaborate gold-detailed stage outfit. In his hands was his signature custom guitar, the distinctive cymbal-shaped instrument that had become as iconic as the artist himself. For a moment, as Prince approached center stage, neither performer acknowledged the other directly. Michael continued his choreography with his dancers, while Prince stood slightly apart, his posture containing both confidence and a subtle deference to the fact that he was entering another artist's carefully constructed performance space. Then, as the musical break approached its transition back to the verse, Prince began to play. What emerged from his guitar was not simple accompaniment to the existing track, but a blistering solo that somehow both complemented and challenged the song's established structure. The notes cascaded with his signature combination of technical virtuosity and raw emotional expression, creating a new dimension that had not existed in the original composition. This was not a guest politely fitting into a predetermined musical space. This was Prince at his most creatively assertive, transforming the moment through the sheer force of his artistic personality. The sound technicians, despite having had minimal time to prepare for this edition, managed to seamlessly integrate the guitar into the mix, allowing it to cut through the massive orchestration without overwhelming the carefully balanced sound design of the performance. For the audience, the effect was electrifying. The already euphoric energy of the concert's final moments, now elevated by the unprecedented sight and sound of these two singular artists sharing the same creative space. On stage, Michael's response to this assertive musical statement was both subtle and profound. Without breaking the flow of his performance, he adjusted his movement to create space for Prince's contribution, not retreating or conceding the central focus, but rather expanding the performance to incorporate this new element. His dancers, taking their cue from him with the intuitive adaptation of true professionals, likewise adjusted their formations to create a dynamic visual relationship between the two icons. As Prince's solo reached its climax, a series of notes that seemed to defy the physical limitations of human dexterity, Michael executed a sequence of his signature moves that perfectly complemented the musical peaks and valleys, creating a visual counterpoint to the auditory experience. This was not competition, but conversation. Two artists with profoundly different approaches finding an unexpected harmony in their contrasting styles. The audience, witnessing this unrehearsed dialogue between musical geniuses, responded with an intensity that transcended ordinary concert reactions. The roar from 200,000 voices created a physical presence in the stadium, a wall of sound that seemed to encircle and elevate the performance to something approaching mythic status. As Prince's solo concluded and the song structure returned to its verse, the two performers finally acknowledged each other directly. Michael moved toward Prince, extending a hand, not in the conventional gesture of greeting, but in a dance move that invited response. Prince, shifting his guitar to a playing position that freed his movement, answered with a spin that mirrored Michael's legendary performance style, while maintaining his own distinctive physical vocabulary. What followed was an impromptu duet of movement and music, Michael's precise, gravity-defying dance vocabulary finding unexpected compliments in Prince's more fluid, sensual style. The two circled each other like master practitioners of some ancient art form, each acknowledging the other's mastery while maintaining their individual essence. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more moments that define the king of pop's extraordinary journey. As the song built toward its final chorus, the energy between the two performers, and consequently between the performance and the audience, reached an almost unbearable intensity. Prince's guitar work became more aggressive, pushing the boundaries of the song's structure while somehow enhancing rather than disrupting its fundamental power. Michael's vocals took on a raw, emotional quality rarely heard in his meticulously controlled performances, as if the unexpected nature of the collaboration had accessed something primal beneath the polished perfection of his usual delivery. When the final notes sounded and the two icons found themselves standing center stage in the concluding pose, Michael in his characteristic stance of controlled power, Prince with guitar raised in a gesture of both triumph and offering. The response from Maracanã was beyond description. It wasn't simply applause or cheering, but a collective expression of having witnessed something transcendent. A moment when artistic boundaries dissolve to reveal the universal language beneath different dialects of genius. The two performers, both accustomed to being the singular focus of massive audience adoration, briefly shared this tsunami of response. Prince, ever the enigmatic presence, offered a slight bow, not to the audience but to Michael, a gesture that acknowledged both the territory and the successful communion that had just occurred within it. Michael, in turn, extended his hand, this time in the conventional gesture of appreciation, which Prince accepted. Their handshake, brief but genuine, was captured by the cameras and broadcast to the millions watching throughout Latin America, a visual symbol of artistic respect that transcended the narratives of rivalry that had so long surrounded them. As the stage lights dimmed and both performers exited, Michael to the thunderous conclusion of his planned show, Prince disappearing as suddenly and mysteriously as he had appeared, the Maracanã continued to reverberate with the aftershocks of what had just occurred. In the production booth, the director of the live broadcast sat in stunned silence, aware that he had just captured a moment of music history that would be analyzed, celebrated, and mythologized for decades to come. Backstage, in the private area where Michael would typically take a moment to decompress before the complex exit procedures of a stadium show, Prince waited. The two had not planned a post-performance meeting, but something about the energy they had just created seemed to demand some form of acknowledgement beyond the brief exchange on stage. When Michael entered, still in his performance adrenaline state, but with the first signs of transition back to his more reserved personal self, Prince rose from where he had been sitting. For a moment, neither spoke. Two artists who had communicated so eloquently through their art, now facing the more complicated territory of direct verbal exchange. It was Prince who broke the silence. "You've got this whole country in your hand," he said, his voice carrying the particular quiet intensity that characterized his rare interviews and public statements. The observation wasn't delivered as flattery, but as simple recognition of the extraordinary connection Michael had established with the Brazilian audience. Michael nodded, accepting the observation with a humble self-awareness that often surprised those who knew him only through his larger-than-life public persona. "They give so much," he replied softly. "The energy here is like nowhere else." Another silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Rather, it carried the quality of mutual assessment, of two singular talents taking the rare opportunity to observe each other directly rather than through the distorted lens of media narrative and industry positioning. "That was not planned," Michael said finally, a simple statement that somehow contained a complex question about Prince's motivation for the unexpected collaboration. Prince's response was characteristically cryptic yet revealing. "The best music never is," he said. "It finds its own moment." The statement seemed to resonate with Michael, who nodded thoughtfully. "Your solo," he began, then paused, searching for the right words. "You brought something to the song I didn't know was there." It was as close to explicit praise as one icon might offer another, an acknowledgement not just of skill, but of genuine artistic contribution. Prince accepted this with a slight inclination of his head. "Different roads," he said, "same destination." The phrase somehow perfectly encapsulated what had just transpired on stage. Two artists with profoundly different approaches finding unexpected common ground in the universal language of music. Their conversation continued for perhaps 15 minutes, an exchange largely focused on the technical and artistic aspects of performance, rather than the personal or promotional topics that typically dominated their interactions with others. To the few staff members who observed this rare meeting from a respectful distance, it appeared less like a conversation between rivals or even colleagues, and more like the communion of two individuals who shared an experience few others could truly comprehend. The particular perspective of having redefined the very possibilities of popular music and performance from their respective, distinctive positions. When they finally parted, Prince to return to his hotel, Michael to complete the complex post-show procedures and security protocols. There was no dramatic declaration or public statement. Just a simple handshake, an exchange of contact information written on the back of a production schedule, and a mutual acknowledgement that transcended the need for elaborate expression. If you've been moved by this glimpse into one of the most legendary moments in music history, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Together, we keep alive the memory of these rare instances when artistic brilliance transcends expectation to create something truly unforgettable. The footage of Prince and Michael's unprecedented collaboration at the Maracanã would become one of the most sought-after recordings in music history. Though broadcast live throughout Latin America, rights issues and the personal preferences of both artists for controlling their performance documentation meant that no official release ever materialized. Bootleg recordings of varying quality circulated among dedicated fans and collectors, their imperfections somehow adding to the mythic quality of the moment, like ancient texts whose partial degradation only enhances their perceived wisdom and significance. Music journalists and cultural commentators would analyze the performance from every conceivable angle. The technical aspects of Prince's impromptu guitar work within Michael's meticulously structured production, the visual dialogue created through their contrasting performance styles, the symbolic importance of this meeting between two artists often positioned as opposing poles of Black musical innovation. But perhaps the most telling commentary came from a young Brazilian musician who had been in the audience that night, and who would later become an influential figure in his country's music scene. In a documentary about the impact of global pop music on Latin American culture, he described the experience with simple eloquence. For those few minutes, it wasn't about Michael or Prince anymore. It wasn't even about the music itself. It was about what becomes possible when artificial boundaries dissolve. We felt it in our bodies before we understood it in our minds. And in that observation lies perhaps the truest understanding of what transpired at the Maracanã on that February night in 1993. Beyond the spectacular visual impact, beyond the technical brilliance of the music, beyond even the historic significance of these two icons sharing a stage, there was a moment of genuine transcendence. When artificial divisions between artists, between musical approaches, between performer and audience, briefly dissolved to reveal the universal connection beneath. In a world increasingly defined by categorical divisions and binary oppositions, such moments serve as vital reminders of the integrative power of artistic expression at its highest level. Its capacity to reveal the harmony that exists beyond apparent differences, to transform seeming contradictions into complementary aspects of a greater whole. And while both Michael Jackson and Prince would continue on their distinctive artistic paths following that night in Rio, their careers, lives, and legacies remaining as different as their approaches to their craft, they carried with them the private knowledge of having created, however briefly, a third space between their separate visions. A space where challenge became conversation, where difference became dialogue, and where 200,000 people in the Maracanã Stadium experienced, for a few transcendent minutes, the dissolving of boundaries that separate us from each other and from our highest possibilities.